September 15, 1916. Flows Courcelette, Somme Valley, France. 0520 hours. The thing that emerges from the morning mist looks like a metal cathedral gone mad. Lieutenant Colonel Hugh Ells stands in the communication trench. Binoculars press his eyes, watching what the War Office has designated C-19, one of His Majesty's first Mark I tanks, lumber toward the German lines. The machine weighs 28 tons, crawls at walking pace, and sounds like 1,000 hammers striking an iron coffin. Inside, 8 men are crammed into a space barely large enough for 4, breathing air thick with carbon monoxide and oil fumes, their bodies already bruising from the constant rattling against steel plate. "Good God," mutters Major General Sir Douglas Haig's aide-de-camp beside Ells, watching through his own field glasses. "It's actually moving." The skepticism in his voice cuts sharper than the autumn wind. For months, staff officers at British High Command have called these machines Haig's folly. They've mocked the very concept. Armored vehicles that could cross trenches? Preposterous. Mechanical contraptions replacing cavalry? Absurd. General Sir William Robertson himself dismissed them as pretty mechanical toys at a conference just 3 weeks prior. But Lieutenant Ells, commander of the newly formed heavy branch of the Machine Gun Corps, has staked his career on these steel monsters. See, 19 reaches the first line of barbed wire. 3 rows deep, each strand thick as a man's thumb, stretched across 50 yards of churned earth. The wire has stopped every British advance for 2 years, turned men into hanging scarecrows, created killing fields where entire battalions bled out within sight of their own trenches. The tank doesn't slow. Its tracks, wrapped in links of manganese steel, each weighing 30 pounds, simply roll over the wire, crushing into the mud like thread. The sound is almost casual, a soft crunching beneath 30 tons of moving armor.
If you're listening right now, help me prove something wrong. History forgot these people, but their stories were never meant to stay silent. Subscribe and help make sure they're remembered.
But this moment of mechanical triumph has been years in the making, fought not on battlefields but in the wood-paneled rooms of Whitehall. February 20th, 1915. Royal Navy Air Department, London. 14 months earlier, Winston Churchill, then First Lord of the Admiralty, places a hand-drawn schematic on the mahogany table before a collection of generals whose collective medals could fill a museum case. The drawing shows a track vehicle, armored, mounting guns. "Gentlemen," Churchill begins, "I propose we build a land cruiser." The silence that follows could freeze water. Lieutenant General Sir Henry Wilson leans back in his chair, arms crossed. Mr. Churchill, with respect, the Navy builds ships. The Army fights wars. Perhaps we should maintain that distinction. The Navy, Churchill counters, understands armor and propulsion. What I'm proposing is precisely a ship for land. Major General Frederick Maurice picks up the schematic with 2 fingers, as if it might be contagious. "These caterpillar tracks you've sketched, borrowed from American agricultural machinery. I see. You expect such a device to cross a trench? Some trenches are 12 feet wide. I expect it to cross anything," Churchill replies. "Wire, trenches, shell craters. I expect it to break the stalemate that's currently feeding our men into machine guns at a rate of 5,000 per day." The skepticism in the room is almost visible, a fog of institutional resistance. These are men who understand cavalry charges, artillery barges, infantry advances. They've spent careers mastering the art of warfare, as it's been practiced since Napoleon. The idea that some mechanical contraption could revolutionize combat strikes them as the fantasy of a politician playing soldier. Colonel Ernest Swinton, one of the few officers supporting Churchill's vision, speaks up. "We've tested the prototype. The Lincoln machine successfully crossed a 4-foot trench at Burton-on-Trent last month. In a controlled test," Wilson counters. "Not under fire, not in mud, not with German artillery reducing it to scrap metal." But Churchill pushes forward anyway, using Navy funds to circumvent Army resistance, and within 18 months, the first true tanks begin rolling out of factories in Lincoln and Birmingham. July 3rd, 1916. Hatfield Park, Hertfordshire. Field Marshal Lord Kitchener arrives for a demonstration with the enthusiasm of a man attending his own funeral. The prototype before him, officially designated His Majesty's Landship Centipede, though the crew has nicknamed it Mother, sits like a geometric nightmare on the manicured lawn. It's rhomboid-shaped, covered in riveted steel plate 3/8 of an inch thick, with naval 6-pounder guns mounted in sponsons that bulge from its sides like tumor growths. Captain Bertie Courage, commander of Mother's 8-man crew, salutes from the top hatch. His face is already streaked with grease despite the demonstration not yet beginning. "My lord, we're ready when you are." Kitchener waves dismissively. "Get on with it, then." The engine roars to life, a Daimler-Foster 105 horsepower motor that sounds like it's tearing itself apart. Black smoke belches from the exhaust. The machine lurches forward at 3.7 miles per hour, approximately the speed of a man walking with purpose. The demonstration course includes everything: a replica trench 8 feet wide, barbed wire entanglements, a shell crater filled with water. Mother approaches the first obstacle, the wire, and a young infantry captain in Kitchener's entourage actually laughs. "It'll get tangled in the first strand," he says to his companion. The tank rolls over the wire without even slowing. The tracks compress the steel barbs into the earth, leaving a path 12 feet wide. The laughter dies. Mother reaches the trench. The nose dips down, tracks gripping the forward wall, the tail rising into the air at an angle that seems physically impossible. For a moment it hangs there, suspended, and every officer watching hold his breath. Then the rear tracks bite into the opposite wall, and the entire machine crawls up and over like some primordial creature climbing from the depths. Kitchener leaves impressed but cautious, authorizing production of just 100 machines, barely enough to test the concept. But by September 1916, 49 tanks reach the Somme, and everything changes. September 15, 1916, 0535 hours. Inside Tank C-19. Second Lieutenant Basil Henriquez can't see, can't hear, can barely breathe. The interior of C-19 is held rendered in steel. Temperature already approaching 100 degrees Fahrenheit. The air thick with petrol fumes and cordite smoke. The engine screams 18 inches behind his head. His driver, Lance Corporal Arthur Blowers, navigates by peering through a slit 2 inches wide, while shells explode close enough to ring the hull like a church bell. Traverse left. Henriquez shouts, though shouting is the only way to communicate over mechanical thunder. Machine gun nest, 11 o'clock. Gunner Private William Dawson swings a starboard 6-pounder, his face a mask of concentration and suppressed panic. The sponson he's crammed into is barely large enough to turn around in. When he fires, the recoil slams him against the rear wall hard enough to crack ribs. The shell strikes true. The German machine gun position, the same position that killed 200 British soldiers yesterday, simply ceases to exist. Through his vision slit, Henriquez watches German soldiers emerge in their trenches, not to fight, but to stare. Some drop their rifles. Others stand frozen, mouths open, looking at C-19 the way medieval peasants might have looked at a dragon. They're running. Blowers shouts, "Sir, they're actually running." And they are. Entire sections of German infantry abandoning prepared positions, fleeing from this metal monster that shrugs off machine gun fire, that crushes wire like cobwebs, that rolls over trenches designed to stop entire divisions. But the victory is incomplete. Of the 49 tanks that began the attack, 32 break down before reaching German lines. Engines overheat. Tracks snap. Crews succumb to carbon monoxide poisoning. 5 tanks become hopelessly ditched in shell craters. 9 are destroyed by German artillery. The Somme proves a concept, but not the execution. The tanks work when they work. High command remains divided, but one man, Brigadier General Huels, sees the future and plans accordingly. November 20th, 1917, 0620 hours. Cambrai, France. The ground trembles with the approach of 476 tanks. This is the moment Els has orchestrated for over a year. Not a handful of machines thrown piecemeal into battle, but a massive armored fist designed to shatter the Hindenburg Line itself. The newest Mark IV tanks are improvements on their predecessors. Thicker armor, more reliable engines, better ventilation. They advance in groups of 3, Each trio assigned a specific section of trench to neutralize. Els himself rides atop the lead tank, a brown, white, and red flag snapping in the wind above him. The first flag of the tank corps, designed just weeks earlier. It's a gesture both symbolic and practical. His crews need to see that their commander believes in these machines enough to ride them into battle. At precisely 0620, the artillery opens up, not a days-long bombardment that warns the Germans an attack is coming, but a brief, violent hurricane of shells designed to stun rather than destroy. 6 minutes later, the barrage lifts and the tanks surge forward. What happens next will be studied in military academies for the next century. The tanks cross no man's land in waves, their tracks churning through wire that has held this sector static for 2 years. They reach the Hindenburg Line, the most fortified position on the Western Front, a trench system so complex it includes concrete bunkers, multiple defensive lines, and interlocking fields of fire. The tanks simply roll over it. Fascine bundles, enormous cylinders abound, would carried on each tank's nose, drop into trenches, creating instant bridges. Infantry follows in the tank's wake, advancing behind armor for the first time in history. German soldiers emerge from dugouts to find British troops already behind their positions, the defensive line broken in hours rather than months. By noon, British forces have advanced 5 miles, further than any offensive has achieved since 1914.